Okay, hi guys. So for some reason you can only see me when I'm like outside the desktop. Um, but I just want to introduce myself. My name's Allie, and so I'm just gonna get into my lesson, and you'll still be able to hear all my voiceovers. So I decided to do my lesson on learning disabilities, and so I just wanted to kind of give a little lesson about what they might look like, signs, and what we can do as teachers. So first of all, to understand it, we have to know what a learning disability is. So IDEA names or calls a learning disability a term to describe specific kinds of learning problems, right? So it can be a lot of different things. But generally, learning disabilities affect children and individuals' skills in reading, writing, listening, speaking, reasoning, and math. And other terms may include dyslexia, right? So that's kind of problems with reading, um, dysgraphia, which has more to do with writing and handwriting, is really rough for those with that disability, or dyscalculia, which is like harder times doing like math problems or maybe understanding symbols, or really recognizing numbers. And so, learning disabilities are actually pretty common. As many as 1 in 5 people in the US has a learning disability. And so, what might this look like for individuals? So, here on the left, I think this is dyscalculia, um, which is like numbers, right? Looking a little weird for people. So, you can see the equations might be backwards, or maybe they have the right idea, but there might be an addition of extra zeros, or maybe it's harder to understand the values of certain numbers. So, addition and subtraction is really hard, and especially multiplication and division as you get older, those different things. Um, and then the middle bottom is also kind of that. You can see that, right? 23 plus 12, that kind of example. And then in the very middle top is dysgraphia, which is just harder times really even writing out letters and words, maybe handwriting, just keeping that good. And on the right is kind of what one form of dyslexia can look like. It can look like many different things, but oftentimes, I know sometimes people switch P's and D's, it looks the same, and also their sight can be affected in ways that maybe it doesn't look like the whole entire letter's there. And so you can probably see in the red why that would be so difficult for someone with dyslexia to learn, or to read something or understand it, right? Um, so there's no one like sign for a learning disability, because they vary from person to person. But there's a few signs that have been noticed with learning disabilities. So, for example, he or she may have trouble learning the alphabet, rhyming words, or connecting letters to their sounds, right? And they may make more mistakes when reading aloud and repeat and pause often, right? If it they can't read it very well, it's going to take them longer to really process what's being said, um, and also just reading in general. And that's kind of the next point. Is just they might not understand what they read, or they might not understand the order of things, like understanding a beginning, middle, and end, the kind of way that things happened. Um, and they may have real trouble with spelling, right? And they also may confuse math symbols and misread numbers. So, like I said, maybe adding an extra zero, or not understanding the value as well, or maybe just like how it's written. So, those are kind of just the signs. Um, and then it also talks about a specific learning disability. So, the website kind of talked about it. Being a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes. So these are language, spoken, written, and then and it manifests itself in imperfect abilities to listen, think, speak, read, write, or spell, right? So it includes conditions such as perceptual disabilities, brain injury, minimal brain dysfunction, dyslexia, and developmental aphasia. So they have like specific ones, right? A specific learning disability. So anything that really affects your ability to do something in those categories. Um, and then I wanted to give an example when I was learning about intellectual abilities this week too, or disabilities, sorry. And I thought about this YouTuber. Like some people might know him. His name's Joey Graceffa. But I remember as like a few years ago. This is pretty old, like 2013. I remember him telling a story um, about kind of his learning disability journey, And I read intellectual disabilities can be affected by lead or mercury poisoning. And I believe I kind of researched it, and I think that learning disabilities do have a part in that too if a child ingests enough lead. So we're just gonna watch like a few minutes of him just talking about his experience and to see what we can learn from that.
Back when I was like 6 years old, I was playing with toys, and by playing, I mean chewing on, and some of them had lead paint chips on them. So while I was chewing on them, I ingested some of the lead paint and I got lead paint poisoning. So, for those of you who don't know what lead paint can do to someone, or especially like for a child, it can really affect like the brain and your learning ability. And I'm going to read you something right here, real quick. It says, even when exposed to small amounts of lead levels, children may appear inattentive, hyperactive, and irritable. Children with greater lead levels may also have problems with learning and reading, delayed growth, and hearing loss. At high levels, lead can cause permanent brain damage and even death. So the amount of lead that I ingested was just enough to give me like a learning disability growing up. And it lasted, I think, I'm not really sure when it lasted up until, but it was a long time. I think till I was in like sixth or seventh grade. So basically, what that meant is I was in special education classes all up until sophomore year. And a lot of my friends in high school or just like growing up, they never knew about this. Like, I kept it so secretive because I was so ashamed of it, and I just was really embarrassed that I had a learning disability and I was in special education classes. And now it's something that I don't really talk about to people or bring up, because it was a very traumatizing like experience growing up, just because me, like, I was so judgmental about myself, like worrying about what people were going to think about me. And I mean, some people did make fun of me because of it. Like, I would go to the special education classes where there were kids with Down syndrome and people with a lot worse things than me, but I was put in the same class with them because my school didn't have like that many options. So yeah, it was really hard, just like having to.
Okay, so what really stood out to me was him talking about the struggles that he had, and it made me think about just what we can do to help our students and individuals with learning disabilities, help them to feel like their disability is not holding them back, or they have to be ashamed that they're getting the extra help, or they might qualify for special education. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about that.
Back
So I want to talk about what services or what kind of options are offered educationally and just generally for students with learning disabilities. So there's evaluation procedures that they go through. So school systems will provide the student research-based intervention, and so that keeps like track of the performances. And they also observe the student in his or her learning environment, so see how they react just maybe in their regular general learning environment. And so once they're evaluated and found eligible for special education, of course we'll be learning about IEPs, um, and we're gonna create one. We they get to they get the IEP created, which will help them plan out what they're going to be doing academically to help them grow and eventually kind of just transition into being able to understand things better and work with the disability. Um, And so, some general supports in the classroom, we'll talk about what we can do as teachers, but we need to make accessible instruction materials and assistive technology such as tape recorders, or even voice recognition systems, right? If a student can't read very well, but they can explain it, or they can't read very well, but they can understand if it's explained to them. If they can't write very well, but they completely understand the concept and they can talk about it verbally, they can, you know, show that they have a really deep understanding, then we should provide those ways that they can still show that they're learning. That disability is not something that means okay, we're automatically, if they can't do it with the general class, then we're not going to help them at all. And so the last thing I want to talk about was just what we as teachers can do to help. And so a couple of things that are recommended is breaking tasks into smaller steps. So maybe um, working out a problem step by step, maybe giving them more time to do that. And it also leads into giving the student more time to finish schoolwork or tests, right? And goes to the last point too, learning about different testing modifications. You're going to want to make that accessibility and modification, because a student might understand it, but if they take longer to read or write, and that's one of the harder parts of their time, um, you want to be able to accommodate that, because chances are they might understand it, but they just are going to take extra time. Some students in general just aren't very good test takers. Like, they need the time, and if you're only giving them a certain little window, they get more stressed out about the time than the content. And a learning disability makes it even harder because they're like, okay, I already don't have enough time, and then on top of that, I have this disability that really makes it hard for me to read or write or understand or process this. So you want to work with that. And then we want to let students with writing difficulties use computers to help with spell checks, grammar checks, and recognized speech, right? Like, it helps significantly with like their sentence structure, how to spell things if they're not sure, especially if letters look different to them. And of course, above all, working with that student and caring about them, and also their parents, and meeting for those IEPs, because those can be super helpful. Um, but yeah, that was kind of my lesson on there. Just of how to really include those with learning disabilities, and we saw how common it is. So the chances that you're going to have someone in your classroom with a learning disability is pretty high. Um, so those are just that's just a little bit of background and what we can do to help with that.